Shalom and blessings, brothers and sisters. Hope all is well. To all my brothers and sisters, my kinsmen according to the flesh or Israelites, glad you could join in. Got the brother Kadar with us today. We're going to be talking about we were sold by our enemies. I think over the past couple of weeks, ever since this movie came out, The Woman King, there's been this narrative of Black people sold their own people into slavery. It's not a new narrative, but I think in light of everything that's going on with the movie, the history coming out that certain African tribes sold, or rather did in fact sell Black people into slavery, it kind of gives them an outlet in a way to take the blame off of this nation and what this nation has done to us. So we're going to show some things and discuss a couple of things today. But what's going on, brother Kadar?
Shalom, shalom. Glad to be here. Shalom to the chat. Shalom to Salt of the Earth, all you brothers, and shalom to the Most High Yah and the Messiah, the one that preserved us. Shalom to him. Yeah, we have a lot of great things are happening. It kind of remind me of he said he's gonna put up an ensign that the Gentiles should see, and believe it or not, a lot of stuff, as in people recognize that we are the people of the book and recognize that we was not selling our own self. You know, our enemies were selling us to other enemies. Israel have a lot of enemies. So when we look at these videos, we're gonna see that. We're gonna look at some scriptures and bring it out. Brother, I just sent it to you. Messenger. Let me know if you got it.
All right, I'm gonna check that. I'm gonna check it now. Hold on one second. But yeah, I think whenever that's being mentioned, it's one of those issues where they talk about how you paint things with a broad brush. You know what I mean? And so we know that when you're dealing with history of nations, most oftentimes you're dealing with people of color, quote unquote, especially when you're dealing with the Black tribes in Africa. Not all of them are the same, but all of the tribes in Africa are melanated groups of people. So just knowing that, they try to say that Africans sold Africans into slavery. And even with that, it's kind of like they're telling you in a way, that the people of these regions are different, yet they're using the term African at the same time to get you to think that all of Africa is one united continent. All the people are the same. All the people believe the same, look the same, which that's not the case. When you're dealing with the continent of Africa, you're dealing with different groups of people scattered and living in different regions, different areas. And that's, that can be solidified without even going deep into the Bible. But I don't see it. If you sent it to my Facebook Messenger, I don't see it, bro.
Oh man, let me try sending it again. Yeah, I just sent it to you. I don't know why it ain't showing up. Um, I'll send it again. But do you have the first video, the other video?
Yeah, the one you was talking about today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one right. Yeah, I guess we'll have to do that one because it's a little longer than It's not that long, but he got different parts of it the way he split it up.
Yeah.
We can look at that one first. Want to? I'm trying to send you this. Let me see if I can send it again.
I'm
I just sent it again.
You sent it where?
to your messenger, Facebook.
All right, it's still not showing.
Maybe it come.
Okay, there it is. I see it now.
Uh,
All right, so which one you wanted first? The other one you said?
Actually, let's do that one first. The one I just sent first. Like that one first. And then,
Okay, hold
since
on,
you got it, I like to do that one much smaller.
hold on, hold on 1 second. Hold on, bro. Hold on. All right, this video is from the We Woke channel. We under fair use. Um, this video is gonna go into the history of the slave trade and how it all started. What were the means and the motives behind the slave trade? So we're gonna play some of this, brother Kadar. You can stop me at any point. I'll just do it that way. But here we go. We under fair use.
Okay.
The year 1731 and 32, which is right at the period when the international trade had been conducted by chartered companies that had monopolies on the trade from a certain country. So the French Company of the Indies had a monopoly on the French trade. The British Royal African Company had a monopoly on the British trade, and so on. But right around 1730, these monopolies were breaking up and you're getting private enterprise trade coming in. So you have a movement from mercantilism to capitalism going on right at the time. And the Diligent was not a ship owned by a large monopoly company. It was a ship owned by two brothers, the Billy brothers, William Billy and Francois Billy. And so it was one of the first examples of a private enterprise trade breaking into a trade that had formerly been controlled by monopoly companies. And so, in a sense that it was private enterprise, then you are having the rise of capitalism, private enterprise capitalism going on. And that's the point at which the slave trade then starts to really expand. Because the monopoly companies had they were very rigid and had cumbersome bureaucratic structures and so on. And once the private enterprise traders started getting in, they would go to other places where the companies didn't go, and they had a lot more flexibility and so on. And you had a huge expansion of the slave trade then once the private enterprise traders entered into the business.
So basically, it started with monopolies from different European nations. Europe, France, and different places had their own monopolies. But then once they saw more opportunity, you start to see more private traders coming in, people who had their own individual thing going on. And this is what he's saying, how it started to spread.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with businesses now, in a lot of ways, but we see a lot of major companies with how they operate, like Walmart, for instance. They knocked out a lot of individual businesses that sell the same goods, and they just opened up departments in those areas. But slave trade started as a monopolized trade with European nations having their own interests, and then it expanded. And then we also know that Britain at some point got so rich off of it as well as the United States. And after that point, they tried to quote unquote abolish it. But what you got, bro?
Yeah. Also, the um, these people got into that too. Yes, and making money off of the slave trade. Something that this guy he tells a whole lot of truth, but I don't think he go into that part of it. So when he's talking about the monopoly when it becomes private, I think he leaves that out. Of course, we can get a lot of truth, some truth, but he just leave it out. I'm not saying he lied; he just didn't tell that part
Yeah.
of when they basically helped fund the slave trade. But
This dude
this
look
is
like
really good. But
this dude look like he's shaking a little bit.
yeah, he probably scared. So
Here we go.
Each nation, it would be chartered monopoly companies. The government would give a charter to a certain company and say, you have a monopoly over the British slave trade, you have a monopoly over the French slave trade, you have a monopoly over the Dutch slave trade. And so up until about the 1730s, it was these monopoly companies that were sponsored by their governments. And then it was only after 1730 the power of the monopoly companies declines drastically, and it becomes more of a free-for-all private enterprise. Well, in the early 1400s, around 1445, Prince Henry the Navigator, in Portugal, was sending out ships to explore the coast of Africa, and he wanted them to bring back things to pay their way. He wanted them to bring back gold, but they weren't having much luck finding gold. So he said, well, bring back something so that, we're not wasting our money sending you out. So the early ships would attack, especially small islands where there would be Africans living, by fishing mostly. And they weren't expecting to be attacked, and they'd be attacked and grabbed and hauled to Portugal. And they weren't expecting to be attacked, and they'd be attacked and grabbed and hauled to Portugal.
Can you stop it right there? Now he made a good point because Portugal started the idea of slavery. So if you go up to 1455, that's when the post-Velasquez put in order that all sub-Saharan Africans should go in perpetual slavery. So I don't know. It was just that simple. The way he said it, they want to bring back something. I really believe they know what they was doing.
Yeah, I do too. But notice the time that he's dealing with. He said 1445.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is when the Portuguese were over the trade.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people get that mixed up with the transatlantic slave trade, but I think he's gonna go more into detail about where they were taking them during this time too.
Exactly.
And they weren't expecting to be attacked, and they'd be attacked and grabbed and hauled to Portugal. The early ships would attack, especially small islands where there would be Africans living, by fishing mostly, and they weren't expecting to be attacked, and they'd be attacked and grabbed and hauled to Portugal. But about 10 years after that started happening, the Africans started realizing that these ships coming were hostile, and they got ready to defend themselves. And the Portuguese started getting defeated a lot. And some Portuguese crews would be destroyed, and the Africans were defending themselves very well. So then the king sent somebody down to spend a year visiting all the local African kings and chiefs and convincing them to engage in trade and not in warfare. And so that was the beginning of what was the pattern then for the next 400 years, that slave ships would go to Africa and they would purchase slaves. They wouldn't try to go into the African continent and conduct raids because, well, they were vastly outnumbered. The Africans knew the terrain, they didn't. And plus the crews of most ships, these were sailors. These were not U.S. Marines. They were not SEAL Team 6. They didn't really know how to launch a raid on a village anyway. So for the next 400 years, the slave trade then was really conducted by trade. The ships would be filled with with goods that Africans wanted to buy, a lot of cloth, metal goods, other things. And then these goods would be taken to Africa and traded usually for war prisoners, because various African kingdoms were often at war with one another.
The brother Benel Israel did a video too, showing how the slave trade is like what he's saying. It was more of a trade, because the Europeans or the British, when they got to the African continents, they didn't know their way through the continent, how to navigate through it. And the tribes who were gathering up slaves, they were influenced by that due to the trades of the goods that they were receiving. So it was motivation behind why they were gathering up quote unquote slaves to sell them. So that's two different narratives that fall within the same lines. Have you seen that video?
The video of Benai Israel.
Yeah.
I think I have, because he do a lot of stuff on Spain and Portugal. I think I have, yes. But like I said, the guy is telling the truth, but he's sort of sugarcoating a lot of stuff by saying these guys, they don't know nothing about they were just floating around with ships. They don't know nothing about attacking, a village. Yeah, right. So I just be listening to some of the stuff that they try to sugarcoat on that.
Yeah, some of that may be true to a degree as well, because if you think about what he's saying, pretty much is that by the time it got to that point, it became more of an understood trade. Just like in America, in the beginning, the Native Americans or the Indians had a lot of influence on the slave trade, according to not the slave trade, but they had a lot of influence on helping maintain slavery or keep Negroes in slavery, because they knew the landscape, So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I give him that, because well, also when he go follow, he's gonna tell what he's gonna say a little more. It do okay. It could be. I would say, I don't know, but sometimes I think they be trying to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, they do. Here we go.
In the days of the Romans and the Greeks, I mean, certainly, for example, when Julius Caesar invaded southern France, which was called Gaul, he was there for 8 years and came back with 1 million slaves. That is, people from southern France that he had enslaved and brought back to Rome. And the Greek city-states, you learned about the wars between Athens and Sparta. And again, they would capture slaves from each other. So basically, in sort of old world Mediterranean slavery, the slaves often came from nearby because they'd been captured in wars. And within Africa too, when two kingdoms would have a war, prisoners of war would often be taken from one kingdom to another. And then the question is, what did they do with them? And then when the Europeans showed up and said, well, we'll buy them, well, then some of these kings said, well, thought that was a pretty good deal. So then they cooperated and started selling their prisoners of war to the Europeans.
What time frame is that you're talking about?
I'm talking about after especially mostly after 1500. But what made this slavery different, yes, was people are being hauled halfway around the world, which is something that had never, in world history, had never happened before.
Hey, stop it right there. Now, you heard what he said about how tribes was fighting against us, capturing us, then sell us into slavery. Then he went home, he was explaining how war happens, like when the Greeks attacked the French, and how they captured them, they put them in slavery. But the difference is this never happened before when we got scattered into slavery all around the world. Now, we know Luke chapter 21, the Messiah says, Luke chapter 21, verses 19, 20, 21, all the way up to 30, he talks about that you will, fall by the edge of the sword. You will be led a captive in all the kingdoms of the world. He said it's never happened before. Never happened before. It's what he just said. But it happened with us. So the scriptures have to be talking about the transatlantic slave trade, what happened with us.
Yeah, and that alludes to another point of how people try to make this slavery that our people came into insignificant by saying that other nations of people went through slavery, or they'll say slavery is a common theme throughout history. Not realizing that if slavery is a common theme throughout history, who was the slaves most of the time throughout these kingdoms? But here we go.
Yeah, I mean, Africa from early on had always had a series of kingdoms, and sometimes, small kingdoms become large kingdoms, and they do that by conquering their neighbors. And certainly the Diligent arrives on the coast of what was then called the Kingdom of Dahomey in 1732. And the Kingdom of Dahomey had been a relatively small kingdom, but over the previous 10 years, it had been fighting a series of wars and expanding and expanding. And it continued to expand until about 1750. And the prisoners of those wars then were often sold to the Europeans, usually in exchange for guns and gunpowder. Because King Agaja of Dahomey had started out with an army that used bows and arrows, and he quickly replaced it with an army that used nothing but guns. And so once he had an army that was reliant on guns, he had a need, especially for continual supplies of gunpowder. He doesn't always need new guns, but he always needs new powder, especially in the tropical areas where it's very humid and powder goes bad very quickly. And at one time he wrote a letter to King George of England, and he said, my big need is a continuous supply of gunpowder. And so he was using his slave trade connections to create a big, powerful kingdom. And prior to the arrival of the Diligent, there was this tiny little kingdom of Ouida. And the kingdom of Ouida was a tiny little kingdom. I mean, it was like 20 miles of coastline and 20 miles inland. That was it. But yet in the first quarter of the 1700s, about 46% of all slaves coming out of Africa were coming from that one spot. Now, why? The answer is the kings of Ouida did not send out armies and capture slaves. They just controlled the ports. And this was an area where there was dense rainforest to the east and dense rainforest to the west. But here was a spot where there was grassland that came all the way down to the coast. So any kings far inland who captured captives in wars and wanted to sell them to the Europeans would send them to that spot because they didn't have to trudge through dense forest and they could get to the coast. And there are reports of people arriving there who'd been on the road for over 3 months and coming from kingdoms up near the desert where the people are Muslim and the people in Muslim robes.
In the interior of Africa, on the road to Timbuktu. Right?
Yeah. And people, the merchants wearing Muslim robes, that means coming from quite far away. And so the kings of Ouida, all they did is tax the trade and take a percentage of it. And so they were getting rich, even though they didn't have much of an army and they didn't attack anybody. And they would just happen to be in the good spot for profiting from the trade. And then the king of Dahomey, who was farther inland and was cut off from the coast by the kingdom of Ouida, destroyed them, so he would have access to the coast. And then he used his access to then develop his army and expand his kingdom. So you had the merchant kingdom being destroyed and replaced by the militarized kingdom, if you put it that way. Obviously, there had been kingdoms before that had armies, and I mean, there's a long history of various kingdoms in Africa. But the new thing here was that they could get ready supplies of guns from the Europeans. And the same way to the west of Dahomey, along the interior of the Gold Coast, a kingdom called the Asante Empire started rising around 1700. And Asante, too, kept expanding and expanding and expanding, and they would take their prisoners of war and sell them to the Europeans in return for guns and gunpowder. They would take their prisoners of war and sell them to the Europeans in return for guns and gunpowder.
So we see that the motive behind why they were transporting slaves was for guns and gunpowder, and for other different goods. It said other metal goods and different things like that. But if you look at that movie, you kind of see where they sort of reflect that in a way. They don't, like you say, they don't dwell on it. You know, it's more so they just mention it. You know what I mean? But that's the motive behind it. The goods that they were getting from the Europeans, and you still see that today. That's a lot of what America do. You know, when it comes to dealing with other nations for certain goods, they give them weapons. You know, especially African nations, they still doing that. But what you got, bro?
I'm gonna read a verse right here. Matter of fact, let's go to Joel. Joel, I'm pretty sure everybody on this chat knows Joel 3. And I'm gonna read that. It says, "For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down in the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people, for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and part my land. And they have cast lots for my people, have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they may drink. Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre, and Zidon, and all the coast of Palestine? Will ye render me a recompense? And if ye recompense me speedily will I return your recompense upon your own head, because you have taken my silver and my gold, and have cast and carried into your temples my godly and pleasant things. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto what? Sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border." Now, when we look at these passages of scriptures, some people are trying to say, well, that happened in the book of Maccabees. But when you look at the book of Maccabees, you didn't have to sell Israel. All you had to do was conquer them. Remember what the guy said? When you conquer a nation, you take them into slavery. That's what they was doing during the time. But this had never happened until the Arab slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade, when the selling part happened. So when you see these nations over here that we also, we got another video we're going to play, that's capturing us, remember, we prisoners of war, and selling us. We've been sold by our enemies to other enemies. And if you read Psalms 83, it's right there. You're going to see Tyre on that list, or Tyra on that list, because they the ones sold us. and they're gonna get a recompense upon their own head. You go ahead.
You want to read that Daniel's 9 verse 11 and 12?
Yeah, let me go there. Okay, Daniel 9, verse 11 and 12. Ye all Israel have transgressed the law, even by departing that they might not obey the force therefore. The curse is poured upon us. That's in Deuteronomy 28, tells us about the curse. And the oath that is written is the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. Verse 12. And he has confirmed his word which he spoke against us and against our judges that judge us, by bringing upon us a great evil. For under the whole heaven have not been done as have been done upon Jerusalem. Wow. Sound like 70 AD, don't it?
Yeah, and it's confirming what he's saying, how there was no other slavery like this one, how these people were scattered to different parts of the world. And he was giving you descriptions of how there were a lot of wars between different tribes. And whatever tribe conquered the other tribe, they took that tribe to a different region or a different land, or back to where their land was. But as far as this trade, we were taken and shipped all over the world. That's never happened before. Nobody.
But yet still people say we're not the Israelites. So you mean tell me we here the Western Israelites, then the Bible is lying, right? If we're not the Israelites. It don't make sense. This don't make sense. We are the true people of the book. Not to be happy that we here to go through all this, but the truth is the truth.
Yep. Here we go.
They would take their prisoners of war and sell them to the Europeans in return for guns and gunpowder. And Asante, too, kept expanding and expanding and expanding, and they would take their prisoners of war and sell them to the Europeans in return for guns and gunpowder. So you have a whole new dynamic of kingdom building and kingdom expansion after the European slave traders arrived than what you had before. The scale expanded greatly. I mean, the companies had been bringing in guns and things as well previously, but not on as great a scale because, again, they were more limited in their actions because they were basically cumbersome bureaucracies that were.
Did they feel bad that they were sending these slaves into a tortured, horrific life working in sugarcane factories in the Caribbean, or they didn't know about it?
Well, they didn't know where they were going, but though I suspect they didn't care because the slaves were always, they were never selling their own people. They were selling their enemies. They were never selling their own people. They were selling their enemies.
You heard that?
They were never selling.
Wow. You heard that?
Yeah.
They was never selling their own people. They was selling the enemies. Wow.
Letting you know that all African people or people of African descent are not the same.
That's right. That guy just told the Bible. I don't know if he knew it. I don't know if he knew it. He gonna tell a whole lot more too. I don't know if he know this, but I got a script for everything he talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. Here we go.
Their own people. They were selling their enemies. I suspect they didn't care because the slaves were always, they were never selling their own people. They were selling their enemies. And even during the period of the slave trade, like when the Diligent was dealing with King Agaja, some of the slaves that were captured, the best ones would often be kept to work on King Agaja's fields and farms around his palace, and then the rest would be sold. So there were always it was always a system where some of the people captured in war would be sold to the Europeans, and some would be kept inside of Africa. And it turned out that the ones that were kept inside of Africa were the lucky ones, and the ones that got put on the slave ships were the unlucky ones. The ones that were kept inside of Africa were the lucky ones.
So
the ones
that right there,
on the slave ships were the unlucky.
Brother, that right there explains why a lot of our people, even come from the Southern Kingdom, is still in Africa. How some was kept and some was sold.
Yep. Yep. One thing to take into consideration. So people believe that we're indigenous to America, you know, but once again, every Negro who believes that when they get their blood trace, it's going to trace to some region in West Africa.
Then they ain't gonna believe in blood work no more. So I don't know.
You have a lot of our people who swear by it and say that their blood is Native American. I don't know.
My brother was one of them. When I showed him my blood work, when I did mine, I said, either you got a different dad or a different mama. I said, but right here it says I ain't no Native American in my blood. He was just shocked.
Yeah. Because a lot of our people sold on that. You know, I'm Native American, but I don't see how that could be. I don't see how it could show up in your blood and skip so many other people prior to you. So many of our people before you skip them and then come right to you. You know, if that's the case, you should be getting some of that money they're getting.
Yeah, you see what happened with the Seminoles. You played that video because a lot of our people did team up with them and did mix with them during that time. That's why you see people with the wave hair and all that.
Yeah.
They would not give us none of that money. Talking about it, we got to prove that through blood work. But you got our people saying they don't believe in blood work.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. But here we go.
The ones that were kept inside of Africa were the lucky ones. The ones that got put on the slave ships were the unlucky ones. Most people learned about slavery in U.S. history courses in high school. And so most people think that the slave trade was all about people taken from Africa and brought to the United States. And while that was terribly important in the history of the United States, the fact is that of all the slaves who were carried across the Atlantic during the 400 years between 1450 and 1850, only about 4% of them came to the United States. The rest of them went to the Caribbean and South America, mainly Brazil. Brazil was settled by the Portuguese. It was a Portuguese colony.
So when you're talking about the transatlantic slave trade, he made a good point. This is another thing that they paint a broad stroke over when it comes to where the people were taken to, where they were transported to once they took them from Africa. You have different islands, different regions. Well, I ain't gonna say regions, but you know, the different islands within the Americas. And you have Brazil. Brazil, I believe the population is over 60% Black. You know, and Brazil has the largest Black population outside of Africa, next to Africa. And all this is because of the slave trade. So a lot of slaves were taken there and to other parts of the Americas. You have the different islands. You have Cuba and Haiti. You have St. Lucia, St. Croix, St. Kitts, all those different places. You have Puerto Rico. So you have a lot of different places that the slaves went to before they came here. And those trades were controlled by the Portuguese during that particular time.
Yeah, when you get to America, you got around 4 or 5% came to America, but they had breathing forms, which I don't think he's gonna say nothing about that. By my
Right.
research, they had a lot of breathing forms, like places like New Orleans, and I think in South Carolina. So you have a lot of breathing forms, and if they, this is, I mean, it was terrible. Don't get me wrong, but in a way, they helped us out without even knowing. You know, we multiplied not even knowing. Sometimes it was our own people. I would imagine that, I heard the stories, they put bags over our heads and we just had to sleep with whoever. But one thing they did, they couldn't completely destroy us like they did the Native Americans. So when you have over more slavery going to South America, that's what it is. More slavery went there to Brazil, South America. How in the world can you say as a person that look like George Lopez is your people? It don't make sense.
Well, that's where the 10 tribes being separate or the 9.5 tribes being separate come in. Because when you're dealing with this slave trade, you're only dealing with Judah. You
Okay.
know,
So I guess they had us in slavery, huh? Where they doomed then in South America. Okay.
I guess so.
But whenever people get on that subject, it tears me up because they have nothing. They have nothing. They don't have nothing completely. Not a scripture they can use, nothing. But I don't want to get all in that. But we see here like that Brazil is one of the biggest population, like Brother Eric was saying, as in having us there. I wonder how we got there, y'all. Because according to these guys that believe that America is our homeland, we Indians. What in the way we doing in Brazil then? Why ain't we in Mexico like that? Just don't make sense.
Guess we was already there too
Yeah, we was already there.
in Brazil. We was already there. Here we go.
So the slaves that came to Brazil were all carried on Portuguese ships. And they were mostly put to work growing sugar. And sugar was the main thing that drove the slave trade in Brazil. It was the main thing that drove the slave trade in the Caribbean. It was sugar plantations. And the thing about sugar plantations, it partly is they're in tropical areas where you can have a whole series of harvests throughout the year. So that slavery in a sugar producing place was much more harsh than slavery in a place where there's only one harvest season or one planting season per year. And there were huge mortality rates among slaves and so on in places like the Caribbean.
So when you talk about mortality rates during slavery, does anybody else's slavery trump ours when it comes to the mortality rate? The amount of people who were dying on the plantations and having limbs cut off and going through all that kind of stuff. Does anybody's slavery compare to ours in that regard?
Jacob's trouble wasn't no joke. No, don't even come close. And you got a white man sitting up here saying this. So we know it don't compare to us, but you know how people are trying to downplay our slavery, or even the Arab slave trade was our people. When they do that, it really sounds stupid.
Yeah.
That's our people too. So if you say that, you really still sound stupid.
Yeah, you're gonna use and that goes back. Once you start comparing slaveries throughout history, we was in most of them. So you're gonna be comparing us with us, basically. How is it that another group of people's slavery or captivity surpass ours when most of these people have their own lands today? Their own cultures and everything still intact today. It don't make sense to me.
No,
We
it,
don't have those things.
it don't. And when people go to the Arab slave trade, trying to compare, that's the most stupidest thing in the world. It's still our people. We're still the same people, dude. So you got people doing that for, to me, it's for agenda purpose, because um, you can say people running around to the Arab slave trade was worse than the transatlantic slave trade. What about the Portuguese slave trade? And see, and notice something, brother, even the breakdown go completely identical what this guy's talking about. Because
Yeah.
remember when we was on Berean's channel and Abu kept running to 1550, 1520 and say, what about Brazil? I said, great. That's Spain and Portugal slave trade, dude.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He was just dumbfounded because he never, I'm pretty sure he understood what I was talking about, but he probably didn't know that nobody had that, knowledge of that.
Yeah, niggas ain't supposed to have that type of knowledge. According to them, I ain't calling you that, but that's how they think.
Yeah.
And we can't, be naive to feel like they don't think that. That's why he kept bringing that up, because he know that Brazil has the largest population of slaves that was brought there. So what about that? What about the, like this dude describing, the conditions were harsher because they had sugar cane fields and all that kind of stuff. And I had some sugar cane too. It's pretty good. But they used our people to harvest that. And so when you compare slaveries throughout history, you'll see that we were in most of them. All the major kingdoms that ruled throughout history, our people were at the slave class, at the bottom class of these nations, all back to ancient Egypt.
You're exactly right. And when that guy on Berean's channel kept going there, he thought he had us on the rope. And he realized he didn't. And he felt stupid because so many Israelites, I remember before I joined Salt the Earth, I reached out. I was reaching out just giving the information, and then nobody wanted to listen. So not to say I got the information, I'm the only one. It's just to say that the Most High gave me the information as in through scripture. Not I had a dream, you know how Christians say, Lord, I had a dream last night and God told me, nothing like that. Through scripture and studying, like, okay, hold up. But so whenever these heathens come there with you about transatlantic slave trade started in 1520, I told him, I said, better yet, how about 1455?
Right.
Like what?
Yeah, go ahead and start it there.
Because he didn't understand. And then when they said the Amorites, I said, uh-oh, brother Eric going to get them. And he didn't want to talk about that, did he?
Nah.
It was funny, y'all. But I don't want to get off the subject, but this is good.
But a lot of people get triggered now, especially when you're trying to prove the scriptures correct and they're against it. They let that slave trade trigger them when you start talking about the dates. When you go into Genesis 15 on them, now they want to start bringing out the dates of the slave trade. Number one, Genesis 15 says nothing about a slave trade. That's number one. Number two, when you're dealing with the issue of slavery, a lot of people are thinking that we're saying that slavery started at that point. They're saying that, okay, y'all saying 1619 is the beginning, or that was the transatlantic slave trade, but it started before then. But the prophecy is dealing with a kingdom, it's dealing with a nation, and it's dealing with a land. So trying to bring the slave trade into it, or trying to deal with the dates of the slave trade, is really taking you away from the issue altogether. from what the prophecy is actually saying. And this is why whenever people bring that up, you find yourself not even really dealing with what the prophecy is saying. But that's just something that I noticed in dealing with this, dealing with people who try to use that point.
In the 1500s, there was an agreement between Spain and Portugal in which they divided up the world as they were exploring of who could trade where. And the Portuguese got the right to trade in Africa and Brazil, and the Spanish did not have the right to trade in Africa. So that's why you didn't have Spanish ships going to Africa and participating in the slave trade.
Right.
So they would always contract out for Mexico, for Argentina, other parts of Latin America that were Spanish colonies and were not Portuguese colonies. They would contract it out, and the contract was called the Asiento. And for about 100 years, the Portuguese, all this carried, whatever slaves came into the Spanish colonies of South America were carried by the Portuguese. Then the Asiento contract was held for a while by the Dutch, and then it was held for a while by the French, and then it was held for a while by the English. And so different people held it, but it was always other countries that were taking slaves to the Spanish colonies of the New World and not Spanish ships because of that treaty that was created in the 1500s.
So letting you know that in the 1500s, it was Spain and Portugal who basically made a treaty over the trade. And we got history to show you how, who was that? Britain. It was what was it? When the slaves started coming here in 1619, I'm trying to think of it, but probably 10 years prior to that point is when the British started to establish their slave colonies here in America before they actually started bringing them over here. And that was, like I say, 10 years prior. So around 1610, 1611, somewhere up in there. So they started establishing their slave colonies here in America. But if you rewind it back prior to that, all through the 1500s, it was the late 1500s when the British started to take over, like around 15. What'd you say?
I say, yep.
Yeah, they started to take over like in the late 1500s. I forget the exact date, but prior to that, you dealing with Spain and Portugal.
Mm-hmm. Just like he was saying, you had the Dutch, the British, the colonies. When you get to 1619, because during that point, what you was talking about, when the British, you had basically a lot of Europeans right there wanting a hand in that, which we know they are the same people, but so to speak. And then when you get to 1619, it was a Portugal boat coming from there. They intercept the boat. That's had 20 Israelites on that boat, which end up in Jamestown, Virginia, in 1619. It's a pretty good story. I ain't gonna say a pretty good story because it's not a good story, but it's proof to who we are and the different kingdoms that we went through the slave trade, what Daniel saw and what John saw in Revelation. A lot of people miss these things. One thing I would say, when you bring out this proof, won't nobody debate it because they know it happened. You see what I'm saying? Won't nobody say, show me the proof of that. If you do that, something ain't right with you if you say something like that. So that's why nobody don't want to debate that, because they know the truth. Spain and Portugal, the colonies, America. So,
Yep. That goes along with that breakdown in Revelations. What was it? Revelations 4.
17, Revelation 17, 9 to 11. The 8th came out of the 7th. we know America came out of Great Britain,
Yeah.
in 1776, 4th of July, with a lot of our people celebrate. I don't know why they celebrate. Well, I do know, right? Because I used to celebrate. Well, I didn't really celebrate, and I just liked being off. I don't know. But yeah, 1776. So yeah, it goes along with that, and it can't nobody go against it. I mean, even remember a Booth said, I said, what did America come out of? He said, Great Britain.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's there. You cannot go against this history and the Bible. It lines up so much. So now, this guy right here, he's telling the truth, and you're going to have a lot of white people that watch this. You can tell he's kind of scared what he's saying. But
Yeah. I mean, he letting some stuff out, but in any case, we see that more clarity is brought forth with this narrative of Africans selling other Africans. He made it clear that they weren't selling their own people, they were selling their enemies. Now he's going deeper into the slave trade, how it transitioned over from 1455 all the way through the 1500s, going into the British, the Dutch, and the French. The people who got the continent divided up. But here we go.
But the reason slaves were branded is because on a slave ship, most of the slaves were purchased on behalf of the owners of the ship. But some of the slaves were purchased especially by the officers themselves. And the reason the officers would go on slaving voyages is because they could make 10 times as much money from purchasing slaves and reselling them in the New World as they could make from their salaries. So they used it to make a distinction between the slaves who were purchased on behalf of the owners of the ship and those who were purchased by the crew members.
So they had the slave. Now remember, at this time, slavery is it's not monopolized anymore. It's more of a free enterprise where you got individual corporations partaking in it because of the profits. And what he just explained, these dudes was pretty much drop shipping slaves. The officers went on the voyages to get slaves because they knew they could make 10 times as much dealing with slaves than they were making with their salary. So they'll go and purchase slaves, brand them, and as they were getting off, they would know who these slaves belonged to by the brands that they had on them. Drop shipping. Same thing a lot of people make money off of today. Drop shipping goods. They find something. They upload it. They scan it to their site, upload it. If it's at a certain price, they can resell that same item for probably double or 3 times the price. What you think, bro?
Exactly right. That's something. Can you imagine? These officers. I'm like, man, we make way much more money than I cut out the middleman. That's basically what he did. And he left his job and went, on the voyage, got the slaves, and he made more money because he cut out the middleman. And then he said they sold them after they got in the New World. We got this lady that's on CNN trying to say, oh, we got to get to the core of this.
Mm-hmm.
The core of this is sell. Everybody was selling. And everybody going to pay according to Joel chapter 3. So, she must don't know history. I don't like this lady don't know what she's talking about. She's been biased because it doesn't matter. Let's say what she's saying was correct. It doesn't matter. Did your people buy us? Yes. Did they sell us again? Yes. But it doesn't matter. You still owe us. Everybody owe us.
Right.
Now, we got remnants of Tyree and Zidon, which is going to come up. It's going to offer apologies and offering us land over there in Africa. We're going to see what they're going to do.
You added some more you want in this video? You want to play some more?
No, I mean, you can go to the next one if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is, like I said, from the We Woke channel. Drop the link in there. Under fair use, we see that according to history, our people didn't sell their own people into slavery. Our people were being sold by other neighboring tribes of Africans. And most of it was by war. And I even have a source, man, that go deep into the history of the slavery that was going on in West Africa. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna have to pull that up. I'm gonna show it a different time, but he was saying that in some cases, certain slaves were elevated, and even he gave an example of how one slave was elevated to being a king. And so I'm saying that to pretty much describe the magnitude of the slavery there as opposed to here. The most that happened here was they put certain people over our people as a means of monitoring them and helping them out. So you see that now, a lot of people get elevated in politics. We have more people, black people in politics now than we ever had.
Ain't doing nothing for us.
Yeah. And this politics is not even effective at all.
No.
It doesn't benefit us in any kind of way.
You know, even if they had the complete heart for their people, they won't be able to do nothing for us over here. If they really, they won't be able to do that. I'm gonna tell you why. Because if we get that comfortable, we won't be thinking about going back to our land. We won't even be thinking about the Most High. We'll be still Christians. So.
Yeah, right. You're right. Kind of see that now, though. I'm trying to get this video loaded. Give me 1 second. Okay. Now here's the other video. I thought this one was pretty good as well. Wait a minute. All right, I'm gonna play this video. This is the one that goes into detail about the apology from the African chiefs. And as we play this, just keep in mind everything that we brought out, everything that the scripture says as well. These apologies aren't really for us to get warm over, you know, because the Most High said, if you recompense me, I'm going to turn your recompense on your own head. The Most High already got a plan for all these nations that did us wrong.
Yeah, and you see in the scripture, you see how the reaction from Tyra and Zidon.
Yeah.
They know what they did. And you know, that's why you see them apologizing. This stuff is real, man. This is really in the scriptures.
I'm sorry, I ain't gonna cut it, but here we go.
This evening, an apology for the slave trade from an unexpected place. Today, delegates from several African nations read apology letters from tribal leaders.
Well, they say they're sorry for enslaving and trading fellow Africans to nations around the world. KSHB 41 News reporter Leslie Dellisboard was there and shares their message of healing.
Reaching across oceans. In song and with letters.
It is very deep. and painful to even talk about it sometimes.
Remembering the dark past and the role some African chiefs played in the slave trade.
The apology of the awareness that there is a broad culture that contributed to this travesty of enslavement.
You know, one thing I noticed looking in the crowd, not many people are there. You know, this is going on the news and everything, but not many people are there. And I wonder what kind of effect this would have if they were to do this in front of a large group of our people. You know what I mean?
Yes. And you notice this one, this should have been all over CNN and Fox News, but you know they don't cover it. They don't want to hear that because they don't want to apologize and they don't want to get that reparation.
Well, they'll apologize and then they'll say we'll put together programs and, you know, build better schools, or we'll try to come up with a plan to get blacks educated and stuff like that. But we know what that amount to. But I noticed that when I seen this, not many people are there. So I wonder how much they think this is really gonna resonate. But here we go.
This apology is directed specifically to people of, not people of color, Black people, African people, people who have been displaced in all parts of the world.
I'm glad she said it. You see what she said? Not people of color, but Black people. Being very, want everybody to understand what this is about.
Yeah.
You know, everybody want to be Israelite. She broke that down. Black people. We don't see no other nations out here hollering for reparations except for them Native Americans have been getting them all this time and still getting them. No other nations holler for them. No other nations don't have their homeland. None of that. That's all it's talking about us. And she made sure she said, I'm glad she did that.
Yep. Letting it be known, because this is not a matter of people of color. I seen that on the video you sent me yesterday about the Native Americans, how that was used for them at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had dark-skinned Native Americans, and a lot of people think that because they're dark-skinned that we come from them or they're our people.
Mm-hmm.
But they use that terminology for them as well, people of color. Here we go.
World. Delegates from African countries extending a sincere apology for the actions of their ancestors.
Some African chiefs, in violation of their sworn duty to protect the interests of the people as well as those yet unborn, and will kidnap, sell, trade, and otherwise negotiate for the transfer of their own people to foreigners.
Asking for forgiveness from their estranged African brothers and sisters.
This opportunity today gives us a chance to have the most important of conversations that must happen between our people in addressing the transatlantic slave trade that forever changed people of African descent from continent to continent.
I wonder when they talk about these things, are they considering the people who live in the ghettos and in the worst neighborhoods? Are they looking at that and considering that as an effect of what happened during the slave trade, us being taken and brought here and being relegated to a certain position? Because, you know, a lot of people from Africa are taught to look down on our people who live in the ghettos and not to come around certain types of people. You know how they give certain foreigners a narrative about Black people before they come here?
Yeah, I talked to an African before when I lived up north. He used to work for Penske, and I would go there and get my truck filled up. And first it was all cool, and I was like, that's when South America started kicking out a lot of white people out of the country, or not really kicking them out, taking the land back. And he said, "Oh, it doesn't matter. They all corrupt in Africa." I said, "So you mean to tell me you don't think they corrupt here in America?" He said, "Well, black people, I think they lazy and all that." And I'm like, "Dude, you lazy. That's why you pumping my gas." I went in on him. And I said, "You ain't been here long enough to know what's going on." I said, "You might be a Hamite, and you might be the ones that sold us." I said, "How do you feel about that?" He got real scared, So every time I come through there, he wouldn't talk to me no more. And I'd be like, "Hey, what's going on?" He like, "Hey." But it's just that it's what they was told. And so you be in America long enough, and we got so many trauma going on within our people. Can you imagine being let loose 1865, 64, and go live on your own? No counseling, no therapy, no nothing. This stuff still bothers us to this day.
Yeah.
And all because of these Hamite nations, Tyre and Zidon, sold us. And when you see an African, so-called African, they stare at you and they talk to you and they say, "Now I'd make them too." You can tell they are our people. The one dude stared at me. I said, "Hey man, why you keep staring at me?" He said, "Man, are you from Ghana?" I said, "No." I said, "My people from West Africa." At the time, I haven't done my blood work. He said, "Man, you look like you either Igbo." And a lady told me that too. When I did my blood work, that's exactly what I was. They know. So our people connects with us that come from over there. But the people that's not our people, they don't connect. And you can tell the difference.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. Like some people you can tell if they're your people because you'll be able to connect with them, But yeah, I've seen a lot of people from those regions too that look like brothers and sisters here. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Michelle Watts said they want us to come back with the money. That's why they want us to come back. I always felt like that too, when they say they want us to come back. Is it to allow us to thrive, or is it for them to use us? Because everybody got their own motive,
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. If we know we're the people, we are the people of the truth of the Bible, the word, the Israelites of the Bible, completely Negro descent, so to speak, where we was named in Portugal and Spain. Even before Portugal, they call us Negroes. We see that Niger or whatever in the Bible. We see that Acts 13.
Yeah.
So what happens when you do have us? Your country is blessed. You notice that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. And that is true. Every nation that we served was the greatest ruling powers of the earth. For however long they ruled, then we transitioned to another kingdom. They took that spot all the way up to now. That's one thing to consider, like I said, for people who want to talk about the different nations who've been through slavery as a means to sort of neutralize slavery being brought up here in America. You can tell people like that don't know history too. But here we go.
Thinking about the past and its impact.
When you look at a black person and you can't know where they're from, that's the heartbreak of being a Black American.
Reflecting on the future.
We have to face up to the things that we are part of and understand why it happened. Because once we can do that, then we can move forward to the next level.
Opening up a new chapter of love, life, and healing.
You think also with them making this a news story, is this another way that they're trying to pass the blame off? You get what I'm asking?
Yeah, but they are saying we sorry. I would like to know these tribals' names. Who's up here? The chiefs.
Yeah.
I I was supposed to be. I would like to know their name and do research and see if we go back to Tyree and Zidon. But they are saying we sorry. We're like we. In other words, what I heard now in Ghana, the guy over there in Ghana saying we sold the people of God. We know that, and we asked for forgiveness. What he said. When a lot of people had came over there at one time, I had a sister that went over there, and she said they bowed down to her when she got there. So they are actually, I don't know if they sincere. I wouldn't dare put that on, but they saying these things and they asking, forgiveness, we sorry. But these brothers look like us. You see them on that, they look like us. So they could be the ones that left and could be our people and not even know. Because remember what she said, you look at a black person, you wonder where they come from. Jeremiah tells you that we should discontinue from our heritage. You see? Yeah.
Yeah. So they could be apologizing in the stead of the actual people who was involved in it and not know it.
Not know it. You're right.
Yeah. Brother Ralph say he want to hear them say Hebrews. I feel you. Go on and make it clear.
I guess he's a president or whatever from Ghana. He said we sold the people of God. He said that. That's what he said.
Yeah. Yeah, Brother Yash. But yeah, let me play some more of this. Almost done.
I now know that they acknowledge, they being in Africa, acknowledge that I'm a sister, that I am a mother, that I am a descendant, and not separating me from the history, not separating my journey of 400 years just because I landed here.
Kansas City, Kansas. Leslie Delaspore.
She didn't use the Bible. She said 400 years. Man, I am tired. I don't want one person bringing on saying we're not the people. This lady just said 400 years, then you not one Bible verse. Come on, man.
Yeah, it's gonna start coming out. It's busting out through the seams at this point, because I got another video where a sister's giving some information, some prophetic information. She doesn't really claim to be an Israelite or nothing like that, but a lot of this information is coming out from different angles. 400 years. We've been hearing that for a while, but now we're starting to hear it more, especially in atmospheres like this.
SHB 41 News.
Yeah, man. So we got more clarity on the issue of Black people selling Black people into slavery, like they say, or Africans selling Africans into slavery, trying to make you think that all people live in Africa are the same. And it's a way to take the blame off of themselves. Yeah, we can accept the fact and establish the fact that we were taken from Africa, and the tribes in Africa had a hand in selling us to the Europeans. But like Brother Kadar said, that doesn't absolve the Europeans of any responsibility. They bought us, they brought us to their land, and they forced us to be servants. They stripped our humanity away from us. They stripped our culture. They stripped our identities. And they force us to assimilate into what they pretty much set up for us, because we're not even really assimilated into society. We're just really programmed mentally.
That's right.
They never accepted us as Christians, even though we're more Christians than they are. Can't nobody praise the Lord like we do. They even stole that from us.
Mhm. Can you put up T Brown's comment right here? This about Tyree Zardon. Now you see what it said. Put Tyree Zardon put Israelites to apologize to Israelites about the trespass. No wonder why he returned their recompense about only. Hey, that's another one. When I seen that, I thought about the same thing. When you go to Joel 3, you know, like what have you to do to me, O Tyree Zardon? Oh no, don't get scared now. You gonna get it. So that's what's going on. I'm glad T Brown seen that. And a lot of brother, a lot of these brothers put a lot of scriptures that I was looking at was going through the lesson, but we see that Tyree and Zidon is trying to get their apology because they know what's gonna happen. Because what's it say? I'm gonna sell your children to who? Judah. And they gonna sell them to who? To the Sabines. So all that's in Joel 3, and Tyree and Zidon did something. Now remember, Joel 3 says Tyree and Zidon sold us to the Grecians. Now I'm gonna read Amos 1 and 9 right quick. Check this out, y'all. Same prophecy. Amos 1 and 9 says, "Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgression of Tyrus, and 4 I will not turn away the punishment." Remember, they apologize, right? It's what we see now, y'all. He said, "I will not turn away the punishment." It sounds like somebody's trying to apologize, right? You know, when your kid get in trouble, they do something wrong, they, "Oh, daddy, I'm sorry, they crying." "Okay, son, I'm sorry, but I gotta punish you. I still gotta punish you." That's what the Most High is telling them. He said, "I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they deliver up the whole captivity unto who? Edom, and remember not the brotherly covenant." They supposed to be in our brothers. Come on, they supposed to be cool with us. But guess what they did? Edom and Grecians is marked as the same prophecy, so we know they mixed in. It's the same people. Wow.
Now, what I'm still trying to understand is if we're supposed to be indigenous, you know, if we're really descendants from Indians and this is our land, then what are we to do with all of this information? Once again, we see that us being brought over here as slaves is being acknowledged. Now, one thing he did make a point on was the amount of slaves being brought here, and we touched on that. He said about 4%. And that's probably why when you look at the population, we're always within 12 to 14% of the population, according to them. But like the brother said, when they brought us here, they had breeding farms. They bred us like animals. You know, time goes on, we still multiplying and growing as a people, spreading out. And so that's another thing to consider as well. But when you look at people saying that we indigenous, you know, what do you do with all this information now about us being brought over here as slaves? How do you deal with that now if you believe that you're indigenous to this land? All the records, all the different nations that's acknowledging it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you say we're in this is the stupidest thing. In other words, when a black person say we're indigenous to this land, they don't believe in the Bible. The reason I say that, even from the beginning, in Genesis 11, that's when he confused everybody and scattered them. Guess why they was at? Where's where they come from? All of them come from what we call Africa now. So that's stupid to even say that. Now, if you don't believe in the Bible, that's why you say that.
Yep. And even the dark-skinned Native American tribes, if you do research deep enough on them, they all migrated over here at some point. This is why when you check their DNA, a lot of their DNA traced back to East Asia. So at some point, they migrated to this region, and I'm gonna do another discussion coming up soon dealing with the map.
And will you show that video I sent you?
It
talks about that in that video about the Tiano Indians.
Yeah.
I sent you, it talks about that too. It even breaks down the DNA, even from Dominica, showing that Dominica, the DR, has 22% Tiano Indian native, and the Hades have 0%. Now, how in the world Hades has 0%? Because they didn't mix with them.
Wow. Yeah. So they got their own DNA, their own people group, and most of them trace to the East Asia. You'll see they'll have a lot of percentage of their DNA traced into those regions. Some of them might have some Hamite in them too.
A lot of them do. It's very slim because what they be mixing, but at the beginning, that's what they were.
Yeah. A lot of them have, well, that's where they come from. They came to this region. So that's where understanding the map and everything come in to show you how they migrated to this region. Because the way they show us the map now, you know, there's no way it'll make you question that. And that's why a lot of people, when it comes to migration patterns, it's a lot of confusion on where people went and how they ended up in certain places. It's because they project the map to us wrong. But that's all I got, man. What you got? You got anything else?
No, that's all I got. Kingdom Conversation get to come on and we're about 8:30, I believe.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Brother Cleo, no, he be hyped up.
No. KC 7 p.m.
KC. Yeah.
5 p.m. Pacific. And it'll be 8 where you are, right? 8.
Yeah, I think it's 8. Yeah. So he be coming on about 30, a little less than 30 minutes. So it was good. I'm glad we got to bring that out. And we got a lot more we're gonna talk about, bring out, y'all. Is coming. And I gotta get back on the wilderness, y'all. Because I believe the wilderness is where we was picked up at. But we'll see. Shalom, y'all. Oh, you want to greet the chat before we go?
Yeah, we can do that. Got brother Jason Camphor. Shalom to the brother Jason. Glad you're in the chat. Got brother JPM, Jason Phillip. He says, "For ye shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands."
Hallelujah. I said, hallelujah.
Amen. We got Maria M. Shalom to you, Sister Maria. Glad you could be in the chat with us, hearing us rambling on this live. We got My Too Much for you. Shalom and blessings. Hope all is well with you. Sister Michelle Y. Shalom to you. Hope all is well. SOY. Shalom, family. And the brother Jason Camper. Shalom to you, bro. Glad you could join in with us. Sister Patricia Thomas. Shalom, family. Blessings to all in the chat. Shalom to you, Sister Patricia. Glad you could join in with us. Mikael Yasharel, shalom and blessings to the brother Mikael. Hope all is well with you, bro. Glad you could join in. Sister Sunny, shalom to blessings to you, Sister Sunny. Hope all is well. Good to see you in the chat. Ellen L. Israel, shalom and blessings to you. Hope all is well. Sister Cindy Carr, shalom and blessings to you. Good to see you in the chat. Hope all is well. The good brother Yashadik. Hope all is well with you, bro. Hope they
Shalom, Yashadik. I need to talk to you about some scriptures about them two witnesses.
Yeah. Hope all is well, bro. Hope they ain't put it on you too much today. We got lifted by Yah, shalom and blessings. Hope all is well with you. Glad you could join in with us. Aniana Coleman, shalom and blessings to you. Good to see you in the chat as always. Miss T. Adams, shalom and blessings to you. Good to see you in the chat. Ya Aquab 12, Yehuda, shalom and blessings. Hope all is well with you. Glad to have you in the chat. Apostle Curtis Lewis, aka Someone Cares Ministry, shalom and blessings to the good brother Apostle Curtis over there putting in work. Y'all check him out. Hope y'all been keeping in tune with what the brother Apostle Curtis is doing. He on their heads over there on that apologetic community because they tripping big time.
Hey, that's my elder right there.
Yep.
He be bringing it. I see him and I be dying laughing. I said, good. Mike Holloway just running. I don't know where he gonna run to, but I believe the earth is flat, so he might fall off.
Hey, we'll go for that in that case, but hey, Apostle Curtis say he ain't having it. But glad to have you in the fellowship as always. Y'all go check out the channel, Apostle Curtis Lewis. You see how the last name is spelled. That way you can find it. Good to see you, Apostle Curtis. We got Samantha Gray. Shalom and blessings to you, Sister Samantha Gray. Hope all is well. We got Sister Linya Israel. Shalom and blessings to the Sister Linya. Hope all is well with you. Glad to have you as always. Let's see. It look like that's about everybody. Brother Tasi.
Shalom, brother.
Out there in the Philippines.
The Philippines.
You know,
this Filipino man used to work with me. He was dark skinned, and I had Mongolians, and they would call him. They would say, "That's your brother."
Yeah,
crazy, man. Yeah,
I'm telling you, seeking the Most High. Shalom to you. Hope all is well. Got the brother Ralph Wolf. Shalom to you, brother Ralph. Glad to have you as always. Can't wait till you chime in with us some more and let us know what's going on and give some of them words of encouragement.
Oh yeah.
Because I know he got a lot on his mind. I seen what he been putting on the Facebook about these camps.
Hey.
Out of control, bro. Look, I don't even want to say that, man. I'll let the Most High deal with me on that. But good to see you, brother Ralph.
You know, I thank the Most High that I dealt with camps before I met y'all. Because I used to, that was the prime of my life. I'd be at work and I have a debate. I used to be hyped. As soon as I get off work, I'd be going at it, eat them alive on that false doctrine on who we are, on who is our brothers. And so that's why when somebody come up with that doctrine, I'm like 10 times prepared because that's all I did back in the day.
Yeah. And if you know, I know what you mean. If you come out of a camp, then you kind of know what to expect. You know, you kind of seasoned in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I feel you on that, bro. LDY Virtue, shalom and blessings to you. Glad to have you in the chat. Let's see who we got. Sariyah, shalom and blessings. Good to see you in the chat as always. Brother E.T., Brother Eric Tinsley, what's going on, bro? Shalom to you. Glad to have you in the chat as always. It's a blessing to see you, bro. Cavity Creep, shalom and blessings. Good to see you, bro, as always. Hope all is well. We got Brother Humble. Shalom and blessings to the Brother Humble. Good to see you in the chat. Hope all is well. Did I get T Brown? Shalom and blessings to you, T Brown. Hope all is well. Good to see you in the chat. We got Brother Karis Copeland. Shalom and blessings to you, Brother Karis. Good to see you in the chat. Hope all is well. Who else we got? I think that's about it, bro. You see anybody else?
Well, I think that's about it too.
That's about everybody. But in any case, brothers and sisters, it's been a blessing to fellowship with you. I'm about to give me something to drink real quick and get ready to go on and log on to KC, hosted by Brother Cleo. Shalom and blessings to you. May the Most High be with you and keep you. And I pray more than anything that as we're in these times, that our people remain focused, remain patient. The Most High has given us his word to comfort us in this time. So let's use his word. Let's let his word be the connecting point between us and our people. We have a lot of things that he promised us in the scriptures. So that's where our hope is. And that's what we're going to continue to represent and give to our people. So shalom and blessings. It's been a blessing of fellowship. I see y'all over at KC.
Shalom, bless you all. Pray the Most High be with you. I know he will, as long as you keep that belief up, who you are. Don't let nobody turn you from your way. And yes, we're ready to go live. I was going to ask you, Brother Earth, can you stay on for a second when we click off?
Yeah. Shalom.
Shalom.